Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah, welcome to another installment of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing is now on Patreon. It's free to join, and you can see some other videos that I haven't posted anywhere else on my Patreon page. And you can get a full archive of the show on the Left of Lansing Patreon page. Thanks again to our good friends at Audio Boom, and I will soon post a way for you to donate to the show as well. But for now, I just want everyone getting our hard work for free because, hey, I care about the working class. Be sure to also please like and subscribe to Michigan's premier progressive podcast on YouTube. And thanks for all the views on YouTube this past week. It's been really amazing, and I appreciate it. Also, make sure to like and give a solid 5-star review, everyone, of the show wherever you are listening. That will help not only promote the show, but also help get the progressive message out to a bigger audience across Michigan and across the country. All right. So there are many ways that I wanted to start the show here this week, and I'll probably regret this because I'm going to begin, and I will apologize for now, but I will begin by playing Michigan MAGA nutball of a Congresswoman Lisa McClain. And again, I'll start by saying, I'm sorry.
Why aren't more people outraged? I don't get it. I got to share with you, I don't get it. These folks are monsters. They're criminals. They murder. They sexually assault young women, minors. And you know what the Democrats want to do? Let's release them into your communities. And let's celebrate the criminals. Let's villainize the ICE agents and celebrate the people who are raping your children. That is crazy. And I'd love for the media, just find one parent for me, or any responsible citizen in this country that actually thinks that's okay. I mean, I would love to talk to that parent. I really would. They're criminals and they're killers. And Democrats are fighting right now to keep them here, to shut down ICE, to call off Border Patrol, and to let these folks stay in America, in American communities, in your communities. That is disgusting. What is wrong with these people?
What an embarrassment. I mean, I've said that before about her, but what an embarrassment for the thumb region of the state, and honestly, for the entire state of Michigan. So Lisa McClain was showing pictures of a few brown people who've committed crimes. Crimes I'm sure that they have all been prosecuted for, while she continues to say not a word about how her dear leader Trump and his regime is protecting a global billionaire political elite cabal that either did business with a convicted pedophile or partied with a convicted pedophile and child sex predator. What gaslighting, even for Lisa McClain. It's such an embarrassment. Then later this week, Lisa McClain stood next to creepy Mike Johnston, you know, the guy who's the most unqualified hack to ever be Speaker of the House, as he is supporting all of the redactions the Trump regime's Department of Justice is putting on all of those Epstein files. Why? Why is he celebrating it? Because it protects the billionaire Epstein class, their donor class. That's why. Then there's another completely unqualified clown of an attorney general, Pam Bondi, who made a complete idiot fool of herself in front of the House Judiciary Committee as she deflected or flat out ignored how her DOJ is running cover for the Trump regime and the billionaire Epstein class, as the DOJ redacted many of the powerful names surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein child trafficking ring. And in one of the more powerful images yet of the Trump regime years, there's a picture of Pam Bondi in front of the Judiciary Committee looking down, while behind her is a group of victims from Jeffrey Epstein standing with their hands in the air to show that they've been ignored by Pam Bondi. But remember, they care about the kids, right? Hell, we learned this week that Dear Leader's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that he stopped visiting Jeffrey Epstein in 2005. You remember that? But the files reveal that Howard Lutnick is a liar because 4 years after Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty for soliciting prostitution of a minor and then also registering as a convicted sex offender and criminal, Howard Lutnick contacted Epstein for a meeting on Epstein's Island in 2012. And they shook hands to become business partners for some venture that I'm sure was on the up and up. Oh, and this part is really, really heartwarming. That 2012 meeting on Epstein's Island, Howard Lutnick brought his young kids along on the trip. Now, how many parents out there would take their kids to visit a convicted pedophile and registered sex offender? How many parents out there, if you're listening, would really do that? I'm guessing not many. But notice, though, how quiet the backcrap insane Michigan MAGA Congressperson Lisa McClain is about this Epstein Class cabal. I mean, she's got the nerve to attack those of us calling for ICE to be abolished since, it's killing Americans in the streets and acting completely violent and unconstitutionally as it kidnaps and disappears people here in our country, while she turns a blind eye to her donor class buddies, the Epstein class, dealing with and traveling with and hanging out with a guy who was known to traffic and sexually abuse young girls. Lisa McClain is silent on that, and McClain is only about protecting her class of people while trashing the Constitution for the rest of the working class. And yes, of course, I blame Merrick Garland for doing nothing. I mean, he didn't really do much anyway during his time as Attorney General during the Joe Biden years. And of course, I blame Bill Clinton for traveling with Epstein after Epstein served time. But guess what? I don't care. Why? Because I want them all exposed. Democrats, Republicans, independents, I don't care. Men or women, I don't care. I want them all exposed. But here's the bigger question. Why don't you, Lisa McClain, or other Michigan congressmen like Tom Barrett, John Moolenaar, Tim Walberg, Bill Huizenga, Jack Bergman, and John James, who's running to become governor, why don't you guys want everyone exposed? Why are you protecting certain people? Why are you choosing to be the pedophile protector party? All because these billionaires give you money and power? That's why? That's sick. It's disgusting. So don't talk to us about not protecting children. By the way, the video that surfaced showing the alleged kidnapper of NBC News' Savannah Guthrie's mom, where there's a man wearing gloves, wearing this kind of a jacket, has a gun, and he's wearing a mask. I mean, it was horrifying to see. And it looked like an ICE agent. Just thought I'd make that observation for everyone. leftoflansing@gmail.com is always the best way to reach me. Hey, speaking of the Epstein-loving Howard Lutnick, he apparently talked with the owners of the Ambassador Bridge that links Detroit to Windsor, Ontario over the weekend. And I mean, it's no secret that the MAGA fundraising billionaire Maroon family, who owns the Ambassador Bridge, has been fighting for years to block the Gordie Howe Bridge from ever being built and now from ever being opened. And why? Because the Gordie Howe Bridge, located up the river from the Ambassador Bridge, will eat into the Maroon family's decades-long monopoly. I mean, what the MAGA Maroons hate the most is that the Gordie Howe Bridge is a publicly owned bridge, as Canada paid for all of the cost of that bridge. All of it. So that's why the Maroons met with the Epstein-loving Howard Lutnick over the weekend. They needed him to tell Dear Leader Trump to block the Gordie Howe Bridge from opening. And so Dear Leader announced out of nowhere that he will block the bridge from being opened unless Canada agrees to trade concessions. Unreal. It's always about hurting Michigan's economy for him. And I'm sure Dear Leader's age is causing him to forget how much he once loved the Gordie Howe Bridge, because back in 2017, he called it a vital economic link between our two countries. But of course, it must be noted how the Maroon family gives tons and tons and tons of cash to MAGA Republicans and MAGA authoritarian leaders. Ben Solis from Michigan Advance paints a picture of how MAGA Michigan Republicans are receiving large sums of Maroon cash, like Congressman John James, who, yet again, is running for governor, Former Congressman Florida Mike Rogers, who's now running for the U.S. Senate again, and State House Speaker and man-baby Matt Hall, who's up for re-election this year. These are all real men of the people. They really care about the working class. Steve Neveling from the Detroit Metro Times reveals how the Maroon family has given more than $35,000 to Matt Hall's campaign committee. And guess what? I think you'll be shocked to learn that Matt Hall is completely on board with Dear Leader's plan to delay the opening of the bridge. Yeah, man of the people. And Steve Neveling continues by saying that Matthew Maroon, the billionaire son and business heir to the Maroon family's transportation empire and the primary manager of the Ambassador Bridge Company, donated more than $605,000 to Trump's campaign and Trump Victory, a joint fundraising committee for Trump's campaign and the Republican Party since 2019. It's always about the billionaire class grift with the regime. You know that. It's not about working for the working class. It's about working for the Epstein class. And look, you know I have zero love for Rick Flint Water Crisis Snyder, zero love. I think if you've listened to this show for a number of years, you understand that fact. But even I supported Rick Snyder's push to get the Gordie Howe Bridge built as he worked with the Obama administration to strike a deal with Canada to build the bridge with Canada's own money. And Canada paid American workers to build it. I mean, talk about a win. That was a great deal. And now it's a 50-50 split ownership with Canada earning money on toll roads for the next couple of decades. So that way, it can recoup some of the cost. I mean, again, seemed like a fair deal, and it erased a monopoly stranglehold the billionaire Maroon family had on international travel in Detroit. It gave us choice. It gave us a competitor. That is what you call capitalism. But Dear Leader is fighting to keep it closed as he continues to harm Michigan, which relies on Canadian trade. And, I'd be remiss if I failed to bring up this little fact. As much as Dear Leader is always trying to portray himself as a defender of America from Canada, for some reason he and his regime have zero problem bending over backwards to ensure the Canadian oil company named Enbridge can keep pumping oil through the old Line 5 pipeline located under the Straits of Mackinac. Now, why doesn't Dear Leader hold the same disdain for a Canadian oil company as he does for the Canadian government and the Canadian people? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's oil. And I'd also be remiss if I failed to relay to you, thanks again to some great reporting from the Detroit Metro Times and Steve Neveling, former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who is running for governor as, an independent in quotation marks, but really as a MAGA Republican. Mike Duggan received more than $100,000 from the Maroons. $100,000 from the Maroons. Hey, but what did you expect from Mike Duggan? To suddenly forgo bribes from big money MAGA donors? When has he ever done that? And what has Mike Duggan said in response? I mean, I'm sure he's firing back at Dear Leader's insanity to keep this bridge from opening. I'm sure Mike Duggan is getting on the microphone and demanding that bridge to be opened, and that he'll do whatever it takes to fight for Michigan's interests and for Michigan's working class. Nope, he's done nothing of the sort. He just gave some mealy-mouthed statement that we've got to make sure it gets open. Yay. Way to go, Mike. I mean, that's all the pushback Mike Duggan had for Dear Leader's threats to further damage Michigan's economy. Also this week, Mike Duggan said that he is studying a plan to use a new federal tax credit that allows parents to pay for private schools. That's right, with our taxpayer money, something that the Trump regime has been pushing for as a way to hurt public schools. He's Mike Duggan, everyone. I mean, that is Mike Duggan. He is now looking to use our tax dollars to help destroy Michigan public schools. And he's joining this long fight that MAGA billionaires and MAGA Republicans have engaged in to decimate public schools. He is running a MAGA campaign, not an independent campaign. It's all about working for the corporate class, for Mike Duggan, the Epstein class. Joining me to talk about the billionaire Epstein class's continued crusade to destroy public education across the country is Michigan State University education policy professor Josh Cowen, who also wrote a book last year on how the DeVos family and other billionaires are working together to weaken public schools through school vouchers. Josh Cowen is coming up next. You're listening to LOL.
Bringing progressivism with passion each and every week. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Follow us on Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, and the Gram. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and subscribe to us on YouTube. We'd also like to thank Audio Boom for publishing the show and helping us spread our populist, progressive, and patriotic message. Speaking of which, let's get back to the show with Pat.
Yeah, I'd like to remind you that you can always continue the conversation at leftoflansing@gmail.com. As always, I enjoy talking to those of you who not only took the time to listen to the show, but took the time to drop me an email on your thoughts on whatever is talked about or examined here on the show. Another way to contact me is by commenting on Left of Lansing's YouTube page, and as always, I appreciate talking with those of you who leave comments there. All right, I am glad to have the following guest here on the show because when it comes to education or the fight for education in this country as MAGA billionaire forces seek to defund public education, Dr. Josh Cowen is the person I need here on the show. Josh is a professor of education policy at Michigan State University, and he's the author of the powerful and insightful book called The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers, which you can pick up virtually anywhere, I believe. And you can visit Josh Cowen on Substack called Josh Cowen's Newsletter, which features some of his write-ups on the Billionaire Class or the Epstein Class's war to end public schools through school vouchers, plus interviews that he conducts with various activists, Democratic Party officials, those running for Democratic office, and much more. So Dr. Cowen, thanks so much for carving out some time in your busy schedule this week to be on Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.
I'd like to first, if you don't mind, just get your take on this cell phone ban that Michigan Governor Whitmer signed into law here this week. And I think it pretty much will mandate that school districts have to adopt the cell phone ban policies during instruction time. So I was wondering if I could just get your take on that bill.
Yeah, I'm glad she signed it. It's something that I think she's been talking about. I know Senator Paul Henke, who helped carry the bill in the legislature, was talking about it. This is something that we know works in states across the country. It's specifically on smartphones, which I think we both call interchangeably smartphones and cell phones. But the specific issue here is these, iPhones and those types of devices really can ruin kids' concentration, can be disruptive in class. I'm glad that it's in place now. It helps take the responsibility out of making teachers police all this stuff and principals and can really get to a unified program across the state. One thing I'll just add here too, I think in addition to the fact that we know that these bans are good for kids' development, they also help move the needle a little bit on academic outcomes like test scores. And, while we're having some big fights about educational improvement across the board in other areas, it's really, really important to do what we can in some of the more targeted approaches. And I see the smartphone ban as one of them.
I have to tell you, I'm a little ambivalent on this. I mean, if this is good for the kids and this is going to help teachers, hey, fine. I'm not going to argue against it or anything like that. But, I read this story from The Atlantic. I want to say it was maybe about 2 weeks ago. And they were interviewing all these film professors, universities across the country who were complaining how their students really don't have the attention spans to sit through just an entire movie, like a 2-hour movie, and they were blaming phones and screen time and whatnot. And I'm sure there are many studies that could perhaps back those claims. I'm not saying there aren't, but I remember, Josh, when I was a film grad assistant at CMU. And, at least half the class then would either sleep, complain about how long a movie was, read the paper, or just simply walk out because, they considered those movies, quote unquote, old. But those who did enjoy the film class would then kind of move on and take more advanced film classes because they wanted to learn the art. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is this. Haven't attention spans been pretty much dwindling through all the decades?
I think so. I think that, but it's important sort of when we talk about public policy to kind of try to identify areas that we can, what I say, the levers we can pull, either as folks who advise policymakers as I do, or those who are in the chair themselves making those decisions. And, this is one of those areas that we do seem to have the ability to make a dent in this. And smartphones have been considered a potential real culprit for the decade plus decline in student outcomes that really predated COVID. You hear a lot of blame about different things around COVID and different things like that, but like a lot of the concerns that we've had both in Michigan and across the country really predate that by several years. And smartphones have been one of those things that experts have pointed to as a potential source. And so it's true that there are other grabs at our kids' attention, but this is something that we really can do concretely. And so generally speaking, speaking, I support trying to create pathways to pull easy policy levers when we have them.
I see what you're saying there. While I still have you here too, Michigan, as you know, and I know you've been covering this too, and a lot of people know that Michigan's fallen in fourth grade reading across the country. I think, what are we now, 44th or something like that? Yeah. And today, as we were recording, Governor Whitmer was introducing her budget, and she is seeking to add $625 million for literacy programs. Again, I know it's something you've been focusing on. Can you talk about that and what you would like to see?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad she's doing it. It's one-time money, which, people will point to and say, well, we need more and it needs to be longer term. And all of that's true. I think it's important, especially for our side of the aisle, or mine anyway, to be clear about what the difference between a limitation and a weakness is when you're talking about policy. The fact that the dollars that the governor is proposing here for improving literacy in our state is one-time dollars shouldn't, it's a limitation. That's the money that's available, but it's not a weakness in the plan. And there's a difference. $625 million is a lot of money. And that basically triples current year literacy spending. We do have an issue. We have to address it. And one of the things you mentioned, the Substack that I write right now, joshcowen.substack.com, one of the things I've been really pushing hard on is that for folks who really care about defending public education, that also means improving public education. And that conversation begins with literacy. And so I'm glad that the governor is making this investment. I hope that lawmakers take her up on it. Is it all we should be doing? Of course not. There's always more we can be doing, but it's a good start. And, listen, for somebody who has been just begging Democrats to get serious again on the issue of education, the fact that this governor has made literacy her number one priority for her final year in office, like something she's really going to be remembered for. I really can't ask for more in terms of the things that I've been saying out there in the world and publicly, than a Democrat who's really to kind of make their swan song improving schools. Like that's what I've been asking folks to do across the country.
What is it that other states that were low in reading proficiency have done? Like, for instance, Mississippi, I think it was one, right? Louisiana, some other states. What is it that they've done to kind of turn around their scores? And is that what Michigan is trying to do here?
Yeah, there's been a number of different things. There's no one solution. You hear the phrase science of reading talked about a lot, and that's a loaded phrase. I think a lot of different groups are skeptical of it. But really what we're talking about here is a series of curriculum, coaching, early intervention, targeted supports that you sort of throw everything at this problem, and different pieces of that really seem to matter. Now, one thing that Mississippi and some of these other states you mentioned did do is third grade retention. That is something we got rid of here in Michigan. I'm glad we got rid of it. We've got research from our state that shows that for the short period of time we had retention in place for, this is what I mean by this is retaining third graders who score below a certain cut point on a reading test. We just didn't have very many of those kids actually formally retained by force. And what we did see, though, was that for some of those kids who did get those targeted supports, their outcomes improved anyway, which suggests that contrary to what Republicans might say, the retention is not really the most important part of it. It's targeted supports. It's investing in kids who really do need that help. And, Mississippi isn't Michigan. Mississippi's a much smaller state. They've got a very sort of non-varied economy relative to ours, which is, you've got all the industry up north and farming and fishing here and the automotive industry and manufacturing here in Michigan. We could go on and on. So we're a very different state, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some tools that we could be applying, particularly around the issue of how we improve literacy instruction and coaching in this state. And I think we're going to do that. So those are the key take-home points in the states you're talking about.
Okay. On your Blue Sky account last week, you posted the following, and it really caught my eye, and that's why I wanted to bring it up with you. You said, for all that's written about right-wing billionaires and democracy right now, their deep hostility to public education is undercovered. And you said the through lines are shared hostility to local government that citizens encounter each day, emphasis on equity, both racial and economic, and last but not least, labor unions. And then you shared with your followers that there are three types of right-wing, or as I say, MAGA billionaires dialed in on education, and those are like religious nationalists or the Koch family type libertarians. And then you said kind of new ones here, the tech bro billionaires. Can you talk about how they're each maybe attacking public schools in their own ways, but also maybe in a way they're kind of doing it as a collective effort?
Yeah. That's a good summary. And my book, The Privateers, talks mostly about the first two, the DeVos types and the Koch brother types, because the newer ones, the Elon Musk and Jeff Yass, the TikTok billionaire, kind of new guys on the street on this. But Michigan's pretty familiar with the DeVos family and all the money they've spent to both undermine education, public education in this state, but also to try to bring about a whole slew of far-right policy priorities. I mean, a lot of folks don't know that the DeVos family is one of the chief bankrollers of rollbacks to reproductive freedom in this country. And that was happening right as they were spending millions of dollars to expand vouchers in states all over the country. In fact, in 2022, 3 days before Dobbs v. Jackson, the Supreme Court rolled back 50 years of reproductive rights in this country, the same 6 justices expanded the rights of private schools to take public taxpayer dollars, including in ways that discriminate against vulnerable families. Those efforts have gone hand in hand for folks like the DeVosses, the Kochs, and they all have worked together in various degrees over the years. Their groups are very much mission aligned these days. But the Koch network doesn't care about culture war issues like the DeVos networks. They don't care about bathrooms and book bans and all the things that energizes the DeVos people. They see public schools as government. They don't like government. They see government as an impediment to all the industrial priorities they have, including creating holes in the ozone layer. But one of the things that kind of joins them in the school space not only is this demand that they have for vouchers. Koch was a real big benefactor of Milton Friedman, the conservative economist who came up with the voucher idea. That through line that I mentioned, a deep hostility to labor unions, really is the thing that joins all of these organizations together. Is they have a deep hostility to labor unions in general across the board, but especially in this case to those that work in the public sector. And of course, in this case, we're talking about teachers unions. And so it is, I think Betsy DeVos could live with teachers unions existing if it meant she could have vouchers everywhere. But the real goal here is to help undermine the labor community in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently interviewed a gentleman named Jeff Smith. He's from the Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy, and he is based out in the Grand Rapids area. So he's tracked the DeVos family, Josh, for many, many years. And he mentioned this to me, and I thought it made some sense. He said that while it's great to see so many Michiganders protest billionaires like Elon Musk, for example, as we just were talking about, he argues, that we do have our own right-wing billionaires here who are hurting Michigan just as quickly, like a Betsy DeVos. And I guess in a way, he is sort of echoing what you're highlighting here as well, right? That we're not paying as much attention to the DeVos family, what it has done, what it's doing to dismantle education in the state.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, look, the problem of right-wing billionaires trying to create rules that only apply to themselves, whether it's through access to the government under the Trump administration, whether it's through changing the tax code in ways that benefit only the wealthiest Americans and some of the wealthiest people on the planet, whether it's insisting that protections for working families, whether they're labor unions, whether they're good paying jobs. Listen, I'm old enough to remember when it wasn't even that long ago when Betsy DeVos was chairwoman of the state Republican Party here before she joined the Trump administration. She said the problem with Michigan's economy was that our workers are paid too much. And I have said in many different spaces, I don't need any lectures about how to fix American education from someone who thinks that the way to fix the American economy is to cut worker pay. I think if you make a comment like that, you make statements like that, it shows you where your real heart and intention is. That's, I think, a very important insight into the way these billionaires are thinking, and not just DeVos, but all of these folks. The real idea here is that workers are paid too much and that there's a special category of American, the richest of the rich, who get to play by their own rules. While the rest of us work hard and try to build out lives for our families. And I just reject any right of any of these people. They get one vote too. At least that's how it should be. I think that's something we have to remain committed to.
So just to reiterate, even though we do have these 3 different sections of billionaires, like the DeVosses and their religious nationalism, or the Koch family type libertarians, or these tech bro billionaires, while they have their own real interests in wanting to dismantle public education, it still kind of comes around to the shared belief that gutting teachers' unions appears to be one of the main, if not ultimate, goals.
I mean, that's the idea, right? And they've put a lot of money behind trying to defund the teachers' unions through the various so-called right-to-work plans. But also just, you don't have to, and again, this is all documented in my book. It's been written about by many others. These folks really do think that labor unions are a major part of the problem in the American economy, and also with just other things. I saw Stephen Miller's wife. She's some podcaster named Katie Miller. I get to really go down the rabbit hole with some of these people in right-wing social media. But Stephen Miller, probably the most devastatingly effective effective, awful human being to ever occupy a place of senior levels of government in any White House. His wife has a podcast, and she said yesterday, apparently, that Democrats and progressives are trying to put more women in the workforce so that they can empower teachers unions and other groups to grab their children and while women were out in the workforce. It was this like really convoluted conspiratorial way of thinking. But the point here is that they saw in this framework the place for most women is at the home with their children. And in Katie Miller's telling that part of the reason you want that is so that the evil teacher unions can't get their hands on them. I mean, it's just all crazy stuff. But it is dominating a lot of the thinking in right-wing politics right now. And it didn't start with Donald Trump or the Miller family. It started with the DeBosses and the Kochs before them.
While I have you here, what are your feelings about this Invest in My Kids Ballot initiative that's, I think, still in the signature gathering stage, in which like a surtax would be levied, I think, on income above 500,000 for single filers, and then above $1 million for joint filers, and then all revenues would go into the Michigan School Aid Fund. Have you been able to, learn any more about that, and what are your feelings?
Well, I think the wealthiest Americans always need to be paying their fair share, and that's one of the single biggest problems with our economy, whether it's in Michigan or anywhere else. And I would support any effort to make sure that the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share in taxes, but you and I certainly have to. I also think that it's absolutely true that we need to create real, meaningful, deep, sustained investments in K-12 education. We're doing really well, I think, in pre-K. That part of the governor's budget is really, really important. I think there's been some new investments in K-12. As I said, I really support the $625 million investments in literacy, higher ed access, all of these things. But we need to continue to protect K-12 investments in education. As far as that particular ballot initiative is concerned, let's see if they get that out there. My understanding is that there's been some issues with some of the signature gathering and some of the language of the petition. But as a general principle, I think making sure that the wealthiest people on the planet pay their fair share in taxes and making sure that we have deep, sustained investments in education are really, really important goals we should all be committed to.
Well, I give you credit for sitting through a Katie Miller podcast. I'll give you that. Josh, while I still have you here, I just want to ask you about the RX Kids program, because I sort of see the spending for that program interconnected with this fight that we're having with these MAGA billionaires in their crusade to dismantle public education. Now, RX Kids, as I've explained here on the show many times, is a no-strings-attached cash aid endeavor where expecting moms receive money around $1,500 and then $500 for basically the child's first year. And it's already showing positive results in a city like Flint, which was, I think, one of the first cities, if not the first city to do this, where parents now have the money to pay rent. And of course, not to mention how this is helping the health and welfare of the child, but it's also helping local economies. And I've seen that you called this RX Kids program essentially a voucher program. But I also remember, while I'm thinking about it, that the last time I had you on, we were talking about how billionaire forces in Michigan and most MAGA Michigan Republicans were fighting against free lunches for public schools. You argued, Josh, rightly so, I think, that the reason they were opposing free lunches is because they knew if it worked, then it would further hurt their efforts at dismantling public education. And now we're seeing this happen again with RX Kids because Michigan MAGA legislators are finally, and I was wondering how long it would take, but they are finally attacking the RX Kids program by saying it's nothing but a handout, especially to illegal immigrants, because, when in doubt, use racism. But this is the same playbook and how they always go after programs that are helping the entire working class. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I think RX Kids is a really important new policy tool we have. I'm really glad to see it expanding. I've seen some criticism from sort of the progressive side that it resembles a voucher of some sort in the sense that it gives the cash out to new mothers. And one of the things that I'm going to write more about on the newsletter, I'm going to put more out on social media, and I've tried to do in speeches that I give, is there are only so many tools that we have in effective government to bring our priorities and our goals to pass. And one of them is through the tax code. And one of them is through what's called direct appropriation, just giving dollars and spending it. Where you've heard the phrase, Senator Anthony uses this phrase a lot. I've used it myself. Budgets are moral documents. Where we spend our money tells us where our values are. So I don't shy away from the fact that RX Kids in some ways resembles a voucher in the sense that it's cash assistance. And in the voucher world, you spend it on private tuition, especially for families who are already in private school. And we use cash assistance in this way to make sure that new moms have some of the food they need, the medications they might need, diapers, whatever else it is. I don't need any lectures from, right-wing political lobbyists or billionaires themselves about what these different policy tools look like. Like, from my perspective, it's okay as a progressive, as a Democrat, to come out there and say, yes, spending new investments on expectant and new moms so that they have the food they need and the care they need is a better use of taxpayer resources than spending the same dollar amounts on families that are already in private school, some of the wealthiest families in the state. I think it's okay to have that debate. I know it's not exactly the answer to your direct question, but I wanted to flag it because we should lean into using these resources in ways that align with our values. And I will put my values of making sure that every mom in Michigan has the resources they need, or at least more of the resources that they need to build out healthy lives for themselves and their kids. I think that is a stronger, longer lasting moral value than simply subsidizing tuition for wealthy kids. I'll take that debate every single day of the week.
I also think it's a good progressive argument for this program in that you're investing in not just the kids, not just the families, but you're also investing in the community as well. I just feel like it's a win-win-win for everyone. And it's not just directed towards, like you said, one group of people.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. I just had maybe a couple more moments here with you real quick.
Sure.
You ran for Congress last year, Michigan's 7th Congressional District. And then you dropped out of the race was that like near the end of last year?
End of the quarter, third quarter. So beginning of October.
I was just wondering, what lessons did you take from that run?
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm proud of the race we ran. It wasn't something that I had, ever planned to do necessarily, but I've been out there in the public sphere now for a few years fighting for public schools and standing up to billionaires like Betsy DeVos. And you don't have to be the most tuned in political listener to know that this is a big theme in American politics right now. I thought I had something to contribute and literally wrote a book about billionaires, including DeVos and Koch, and started hearing some suggestions and some encouragement to think about running in the 7th District here in mid-Michigan. And so I made the calls I needed to make and talked to my family, and we did jump in, and we ended up doing pretty well for the time that we were in. We were in it for just over 11 weeks, and that may sound like a small amount, but in a campaign that a quarter is a really important benchmark. We raised about $210,000 just on this message of improving public schools and standing up to billionaires. But at the end of the day, I took a look at the field. I was not in it to just sort of make a statement. I was in it to win. I have a platform already. You mentioned some of them, the Substack and the various public endeavors that I have. And I looked at the field, and there's one candidate in particular that I think is probably best positioned at this point to take on and take out Tom Barrett. And that's Ambassador Brink, who was the first woman to serve in a combat zone as ambassador. She's moved back home to Michigan to take that fight. And frankly, looked around and said, I think this is going to be her year this year and not mine. And so let's be a grown up about it. That's what I told the Detroit News, that you got to be a grown up about these things sometimes. And so we moved on, and it is what it is, but I am excited to see what Bridget does. And I think Tom Barrett's days as a congressman are numbered.
Well, we can agree on Tom Barrett being basically nothing but a rubber stamp for Trump and kind of a human pylon, and a human pylon too, as I like to call him. But since you've left the race now, it's been 11 weeks or whatever. I feel like so much has changed when you left, and I feel like there's this strong anti-incumbency vibe that is happening right now. And that also means, I think, within the party itself, now we're starting to see some progressive victories in state house races across the country, like Texas. I never even thought we'd see something like that. And then, of course, congressional races, I think, last weekend in New Jersey. Yeah. Do you think maybe that was something that maybe people weren't noticing back last summer or back last fall, but you're starting to see?
I think that's right. I mean, look, I think that's right. I mean, look, if you meet a political candidate who has stepped out of a race, who doesn't look back and say, well, I could have done this or I could have done that. I mean, if you find that person, you let them know, you let me know. I still look at this and I think, I think the shot was there. Like I say, I didn't wake up every day like Tom Barrett has, planning to be in Congress. I mean, you know what this guy did? His first week in office, after winning, or not even in office, just before he took his oath, but after he won, he spent, and this is well documented, he spent the whole week in D.C. sending petitions around to fellow lawmakers to get them to the seniority system assigns offices. And he wanted his office to be what his grandfather apparently used to be in Congress serving Michigan. And he felt like he needed that same office his grandfather had. I mean, that literally growing up thinking this thing's almost his birthright. That was not me. I did not plan on. And so, you do look at this and you say, well, there'll be some good weeks and bad weeks for for the other candidates. I think Tom Barrett's going to have bad week after bad week. But it is easy to get out of a race proud of what you did. You hold your head up high. I think, frankly, it can't all be dollars and cents, but as a first-time candidate, for me to be able to raise $210,000 in 11 weeks was a lot of people raised their eyebrows on that. And it showed, to my mind, partly the strength of that message on billionaires in public schools. But like, look, again, the reality is Tom Barrett is going to be the best funded, endangered Republican in the country. And we can wish away all that we want. That funding didn't matter. We talked about the Kochs earlier. He's the Kochs kind of bag man here in Michigan. Their most treasured kind of asset is Tom Barrett in Congress. And that means that we really do need to think about like who can kind of raise those dollars to compete. And although I was proud of what I was able to do, listen, Bridget came in and she's really competing hard. She's doing the work. I mean, I run into people on the street. They've met her everywhere. It's not going to be easy. And Barrett has knocked tens and tens of thousands of doors in addition to raising all that money. So for me, it was like, do I look at that and say like maybe my message would have continued to carry had I stayed in longer? Sure, of course, that's human nature. But I continue to have a platform. I continue to be proud of this work we're doing, and I really do think this guy's days in Congress are numbered. And I think we are going to take back the House from Trump, and we all should be doing what we can to make sure that happens.
All right, and in 1 minute here, you're hosting a forum with Randy Weingarten, I believe, here in a few weeks.
Yes, so 2 weeks from yesterday, so February 24th. It's a Tuesday night, 7 p.m. on MSU's campus. Randy is somebody I work with closely. She's the president of the American Federation for Teachers. Donald Trump's former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, once called Randy the most dangerous person in the world. That's how much they hate labor unions. And Randy's here to talk about her book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. It's a great book. It really links together some of the things I've been talking about, which is why all of these organizations target education, public education, teachers, and teaching profession. She is on tour with her book, and so she's going to stop here, and I'm going to be in conversation with her, as they say in the book world, interviewing her about that book. It's also just the timing. I'll say, February 24th, 7 p.m., MSU's campus. You can go to my Blue Sky, to my Substack. There's various links to sign up and get the final details. It's all free. It's also Tuesday the 24th is the State of the Union. So Trump will be going to Congress later, about an hour after Randy and I talk. So if you're really a political junkie and you want to, I don't know how many people rush out to see what Trump does and says, but Randy is a very sort of influential figure in Washington and in American politics. And so this would be a good way to not only hear about teaching, the teaching profession as it is under attack from Trump and the DeVosses and so on, but also to hear from someone who, on that really important night in American politics is probably going to have something to say about it. And I think it's a real opportunity for folks in the Lansing area, and would love to see people out there.
Professor of Education Policy at Michigan State University and author of The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers. Dr. Josh Cowen, thanks so much for being on Left of Lansing. And hey, as always, the door is open for you.
Appreciate it, Pat. Take care.
You're listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing. Subscribe and give a good review of the show wherever you're listening. You can check out show archives on leftoflansing.com. And if you need more Pat, visit Left of Lansing on YouTube. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
Hey, thanks again to Dr. Josh Cowen for spending some time to talk about the Epstein Class's crusade to dismantle public education in Michigan and the nation. And thanks to Josh for giving his takes on those new cell phone bans in Michigan schools and Governor Whitmer's call to increase funding to improve child reading and literacy in grade schools. Now, I do have to say, though, that when it comes to cell phone bans and calls to increase funding for reading, there's something that's bothering me. It's how Whitmer gladly signed these smartphone ban bills into law while saying how phones lead to increased cyberbullying and decreases in younger people's attention spans. She's at the same time expanding data centers for these tech bro billionaires in our state. So something for me just doesn't really add up. And two more parts of my talk there with Josh Cowen. I think he misunderstood my question just a little bit when I asked him about the anti-incumbency feeling in politics and also within the Democratic Party, and if maybe he would have changed his mind from where he was when he was still running last fall. And I think Josh thought I was asking about whether or not he regrets pulling out of that 7th congressional district race, which is fine because he really gave a great answer and more insight into his thinking, so that's fine. But I suggested that question because of his backing for Bridget Brink, the former ambassador to Ukraine, who resigned because she believed the Trump regime treated Ukraine unfairly while giving Putin and Russia carte blanche. And well, yeah, that's true. And then shortly after, Bridget Brink decided to run for MAGA Republican Tom Barrett's seat. And Brink appears to me to be running like Alyssa Slotkin in a way. Same with another Democrat, Nat Masdam, who is a former Navy SEAL and who was also President Obama's military aide. So essentially, we've got two people running in the same lane in that Democratic primary race for that 7th congressional district seat. And then we've got progressive Will Lawrence. Will was on the show last fall and explained to all of us how he is fighting against the billionaire Epstein class, is calling to abolish ICE, and is fighting against data centers while pushing for Medicare for all. So it's no wonder why I am backing Will Lawrence, because we need to push a strong, bold, and forward-thinking progressive platform to move the Overton window, like I talked about last week. We have to stop protecting things and always defending things. We have to start pushing back. So next time I have Josh Cowen on the show, I like to talk to him more about the direction of the Democratic Party as this nation continues to get steamrolled by fascism. Time now for the Left of Lansing last call. The state of Michigan experienced the second most job losses in the union, thanks Trump. According to Challenger Gray and Christmas, a Chicago-based data analysis firm, we're experiencing as a nation the highest rate of job losses since 2009. That was in the middle of the Great Recession caused by another failure of neoliberalism, which gutted regulations to keep the investment banks in check and decimated millions and millions of working-class Americans, many of whom still have not recovered. Naturally, we, the taxpayers, though, yeah, we bailed out the banks, but really didn't do much to bail out the American people. Now, Michigan lost over 19,000 jobs in January, second only to Georgia, according to this report. And Todd Spangler and Adrian Roberts from the Detroit Free Press wrote the following. They say, the report did not indicate the industries in which the jobs specifically in Michigan or any other state were lost, but said that across the nation, the biggest losses were in the transportation sector and technology. The total jobs lost for the month was over 108,000. Now, here in Michigan, Dow Chemical in Midland is planning to slash over 1,000 jobs, and Grand Rapids-based investment firm Acrisure said it's slashing 400 jobs as the company advances towards automation and technology. Oh, isn't that lovely? I mean, now we've got all these data centers that are popping up and taking away jobs, and we've got no real programs to help people who are going to get hurt while billionaire tech bros from the Epstein class receive lavish corporate welfare from the state. The hell with the working class. What do they know? And by the way, Acrisure sold its naming rights to the Pittsburgh Steelers field. So they spent millions for that, but not millions for their workers in Grand Rapids. How lovely. Now, I've seen all kinds of MAGA types get enraged this week at the Detroit Free Press's picture for this story, which featured a picture of Dear Leader Trump. And they're mad because they say Governor Whitmer is to blame, not Dear Leader, even though his numbers on the economy are atrocious, as nearly 60% of Americans give Dear Leader low marks in the economy, according to Pew Research. And of course, we all know Dear Leader's tariffs are killing Michigan, and it's noteworthy considering how there's no economic reasoning to them, just like his fight to keep the Gordie Howe Bridge from opening. It's always about the grift, and it's all done on his feelings, just like when he said this week that he didn't like how the Prime Minister of Switzerland treated him, so he just simply raised their tariffs. Right, remember, this is all about economics, right? The tariffs are killing us, and speaking of Canada, the number of Canadians visiting Michigan is down by a lot. As Bridge Michigan's Janelle James reports, in 2025, last year, Michigan saw passenger vehicle visits from Canada drop to about 8.3 million from nearly 10 million in 2024. That's a 16% decline, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data. And Janelle James reminds all of us that after some Canadian officials told their people to stay away from the U.S. thanks to Dear Leader, the travel boycott movement has had big implications for Michigan's tourism industry. Since we just look at 2024, Canadian tourism generated over $20 million in spending. Hey, but that has shrunk considerably, thanks Trump. And don't underestimate how the Trump regime's ICE Gestapo's kidnapping and disappearing of undocumented citizens is also hurting the state's economy. I mean, we're talking big money here, everyone. Meanwhile, Governor Whitmer didn't stray too far from economic policies of Rick Snyder. And I mean that. I mean, she pretty much kept up whatever Rick Snyder was doing in terms of trying to bring jobs here in Michigan, which included the neoliberal fantasy of handing out millions and millions of dollars in corporate welfare, all of which didn't really amount to many jobs here in the state, or at least many long-term jobs. She didn't implement a big tax on the wealthy. She was no Zoran Mamdani, and she even helped slow down a scheduled pay wage and paid sick leave increase for the working class last year. So she kept some of the same neoliberal economic policies from the MAGA Republican playbook and, quite frankly, from the corporate Democratic playbook as well. Combine all that with the grifting Trump regime and its friends inside the billionaire Epstein class, and Michigan is getting hammered. You still think corporate centrism is going to save us? Really?
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of The Left of Lansing. Thanks again to Dr. Josh Cowen for visiting with us this week. Next week, our good progressive fighter from Livingston County, Casey Helton, will join me, and I think maybe we'll have a few things to talk about. Maybe. Oh, always love it when Casey stops by. And I just wanted to leave you with this fuzzy little thought. Thanks to the so-called big beautiful bill or whatever, or the MAGA murder budget as I call it, Amazon paid $9 billion less in taxes last year as the company made $90 billion. Hey, I hope those savings will help Jeff Bezos pay for his dental coverage this year. But here's another question. Why aren't those savings being used to pay reporters from the Washington Post? Until next week, remember, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan!
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.